Freshly pressed on Smooth 98.1. Headlines, ARM. Invest in your tomorrow.
All right, it's time now to bring you Freshly Pressed right here on Smooth 98.1, your Love Music, Love Live radio station. And the show brings you today's major newspaper headlines with detailed analysis all for you. There's several platforms to reach us live in the studio. WhatsApp is one of them, 0809 444 0981. We're on Twitter, Smooth 981 FM. I'd love to read your tweets right before the end of the show. If you're tuned in for the first time, it's for 13 minutes. Let's bring you all the big stories for the day. My name is Victa Pepple. I'm not alone. I'll be discussing today with Ikemesit Effiong. Ikemesit, how are you doing?
I'm very well, Victor. Good morning. Good morning, Lagos.
Good morning. It's so virtual today as Glory Atom also joins us online. Good morning, Glory.
Good morning.
Thank you so much, Glory, for brightening up the show with your smile. But we'll get straight into it. Let's begin with Mr. President. Mr. President is in New York. What did he say at the United Nations General Assembly? We find out from the Punch newspaper. Like I said, feel free to react to any of the stories, sharing your thoughts with us on WhatsApp, on Twitter, and perhaps leave a comment on the live stream on YouTube. We're streaming live, Smooth 91 FM, Lagos. The Punch newspaper, UNGA, President Buhari promises credible polls. 6, debt forgiveness. The president yesterday told world leaders that his administration is committed to entrenching the process of free, fair, transparent, and credible elections that would, among other things, usher in a new president next year. He also assured the global community of Nigeria's compliance with constitutional term limits, adding that a new phase would represent the country at the next UN General Assembly. The president also goes on. He's saying that the country has been in dire need of cash. That's why we went on to, take loans. However, justifying the need to address the burden of unsustainable external debt by global commitment to the expansion and extension of the debt service suspension initiative, as well as outright cancellation. Let's come to you first, Ikemesit, for this one. Your thoughts very quickly, and then we'll take that of Glory as well.
So you know what? Not the worst speech in the world, or even the worst speech that the president has ever given. This is his swan song. So this is the last speech he's given at the UN General Assembly, and you would have thought that for the leader of Africa's largest economy and most populous country, he would have been more aspirational in his tone and in his approach towards making his remarks right at the UN General Assembly. But it's really a statement about the state of the country and where Nigeria is in. That, bread and butter, humdrum basket issues are still the kinds of things that, the president has been compelled, right, to highlight at such an international forum. The only real substantial point that I want to make, and then I'll just hand over the microphone, is to interrogate the president's thoughts around debt cancellation. So on the one hand, earlier in his speech, he talked about the fact that, severe fiscal and economic challenges have compelled countries like ours to take on more domestic and international debt. But on the other hand, he's also in essence trying to get the developed world, right, which, of whom most creditor nations, right, are part of, to commit to an international debt service suspension initiative. And it's this sort of language and it's this sort of tone setting which is really confusing for investors, but it's also confusing also for policymakers that are looking to engage with countries like Nigeria, because the impression that the president seems to be passing on is, on the one hand, borrow us more money, but also deal with the possibility that you might not get your monies as at when we commit to as that when we committed to repaying you, or you might not even get them at all. And those are not the kind of things that inspire confidence, that inspire stability, that inspire any form of long-term, economic succession planning, or give any investor, right, a positive or a rosy view around how the Nigerian economy is doing. So I don't know that was the right approach that the president should have taken, right, in addressing that issue. But hey, the speech has been done, platitudes have been shared, so we move.
Glory.
Okay, so I share the same sentiment with Ikemesit, and especially on how it makes us look, or the perception that it gives to Nigeria, in terms of if we would honor our commitment to pay our debts in the future. So I feel like, that should not have been part of that discussion, although his commitment for it, to make sure that the oncoming election is free and fair. I think that was a good point from him. But on this issue, it makes us feel like perpetual defaulters. We've had debt forgiveness before, and there are also a number of issues concerning the way we handle our debt agreement, in terms of not paying on time and then other things like that. So it further deepens that concern about Nigeria's ability, to honor its agreement, in terms of paying back its debt, and not just always coming back to ask for cancellations and other concessions like that.
All right, let's keep it going. Send us messages across. I see your comments on WhatsApp already. I'll take those comments in a moment. Now let's look at this headline from This Day newspaper. PDP crisis deepens as Wike loyalists pull out of Atiku's campaign. Loyalists of the governor of Rivers State, yes, of Wike, have pulled out of the campaign council of Atiku Abubakar, the presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party. This comes amid the pressure on the party's national chairman, Senator Iyorchia Ayu, to step down. It goes on, and I can tell you that there was quite a number of people at that meeting. In fact, former governors Olusegun Mimiko, Ibrahim Dankwambo, Jonah Jang, Ayo Fayose, and Donald Duke, that were in that meeting. Chief Olabode George was also in that meeting on Wike's camp. Also, former Minister of Justice Mohammed Adoke, Professor Jerry Gana, former Minister of Information, South Chairman of the PDP Dan Obier, and former Deputy Speaker of the House of Representatives Chibudom Nwoche were all on Wike's side, including Autumn, the governor of Benue State. They gathered and said, until the national chairman steps down, they're not going to be a part of the presidential campaign council of the PDP. What's your reaction to that, Ikemesit?
So you know what? I've talked about this issue a number of times, and I don't quite. Okay, so there are two sides to the story. On the one hand, this is an easily resolvable issue, which the PDP has allowed to fester and grow into a political and ultimately a campaign and an electoral issue. And I think from that standpoint, all of the major PDP stakeholders on both sides of from the board of trustees to Atiku's camp to Wike's camp and the party elders and all matters arising, could have managed this better. Yeah, the PDP needs to run a very focused and strategic campaign right now. You're dealing with an increasingly unpopular government, which is beset by huge economic and security and structural issues. This is probably the weakest an incumbent political party has been since Nigeria returned back to democracy in 1999. This should I wouldn't necessarily say there should be a walking back for the People's Democratic Party, because that might imply that they have a right or a birthright to power, but they should certainly be in a better place than this. And it is crises like this, which is increasingly giving the impression in the minds of voters that the opposition is not taking this particular election cycle with the same level of seriousness and gravitas that large part of the electorate would like it to do. On the other hand, I don't quite understand Wike's play here. He's a term-limited governor. He's not going to be in the National Assembly. He's not running for any competitive electoral race. He has been a major funder and backer of the PDP's interest and political moves for the better part of the last 8 years. So he's definitely a senior political figure within the party. And in a way, I suppose his argument is that this is not how you treat senior political figures. He's still clearly hurt and he's still clearly wounded by what happened right during the political primaries.
Wouldn't all of this distract the campaigns of the PDP?
Is the point. It is already distracting the campaigns of the PDP. And so you would think that at the very least, let's all knuckle heads to the approach should be, let's all knuckle heads together. Even if it is a piece of the graveyard that you want to negotiate and agree on, let's just come together and coalesce around the candidates that we have right now, who is not going to be changed, or the PDP national chairman right now. And really this fight over the status of the PDP national chairman is really a proxy for the fact that Atiku is the person on the PDP's presidential ticket. And many people, especially Southern PDP political brokers, are not happy with that. But the approach should be, let's all come together, let's fight this election, let's win it. When we are in power, all of the concessions that we would want to extract, having helped these candidates that we didn't quite like, and this particular chairman that we are not really sold on, gets into office and become a party of governance. All of those other concessions, you can then negotiate and put pressure on them from a position of strength. Right now, Wike is not operating from a position of strength. He's term limited. He's going to be out of political office. He might still remain, and he probably will still remain, a very influential and a very significant political figure, but he's not doing that from any constitutional, any electoral or any constitutional mandated position. So all of the fire and the fury around this, I don't quite get. And there's an election 4 or 5 months away, and this just feels like the PDP is shooting itself. Right.
Quickly, Ikemesit, let's just add this from the Nation newspaper. Atiku to Weekend orders, ASUU won't resign.
So Atiku's argument is basically that there's a party protocol, there are rules, the constitution is very clear, is very clear about the circumstances under which the national chairman can be removed. He doesn't have the power personally as the party's presidential candidate to remove him. A particular committee that was set up by the party to investigate some of the claims that surrounded the nomination and the actualization of the national chairman, right, and sundry issues have in effect passed the vote of confidence in the chairman. And so really his arms are tied. But the point and the fact of the matter remains that a political settlement on this particular issue can be reached. This is not an intractable issue. This is not a fundamental difference on ideological grounds. This is not a fundamental difference on a governance approach to a key issue. This is a bread and butter political power play issue. The PDP in the past has been very good at solving problems like this. Why this particular issue appears unsolvable from every side of the divide that you look at is the actual mystery, and it just betrays a certain level of unseriousness and a relative lack of commitment where people are pursuing their narrow political interest over the wider interest of fighting and winning an election.
We'll do for a break. When we do come back, we'll discuss ASUU. The National Industrial Court has asked ASUU to go back to the classroom, but ASUU seeks to appeal that particular interpretation of judgment in court. After the break, we'll get straight to your messages. Quite a number of them we've seen coming in on WhatsApp, and we'll get to talk about ASUU in a moment. Stay with us.
It's Johnny Drill, and you're listening to Smooth Breakfast Show.
The messages are so much.
Foreign, I can imagine. I can imagine.
Let's see how much we can take right before we get back into the stories again.
Okay then.
These programs stand a chance to receive up to $120,000.
Thank you. On YouTube, leave a comment for us. We'll try to take it before the end of the show.
Industry experts. Are you a fintech or proptech startup in need of funding? Don't miss this chance to take your business idea to the next level. Hurry and apply today by visiting www.apply.techstars.com.
We're back.
This is Frank Dara, and you're listening to Smooth Breakfast on Smooth 98.1. Love music, love life.
Thank you very much for staying tuned. You're still listening to Smooth 98.1, your love music, love live radio station. Let's quickly race through some of the messages you've sent across to us on WhatsApp. Dami from Ikeja is saying Nigerian politicians are like the prodigal son that squandered away their inheritance. If we don't deal with the problem of fiscal imprudence, we'll be back here again in a few years. Ikemesit, my brother, I salute you. On the debt cancellation matter, please tell Mr. President that the parable of the prodigal son was a parable. The two messages back to back just refers to the parable of the prodigal son. Ikemesit, your assertion on the president's statement is wrong. Investors don't borrow money, last I checked. They come in for business and get returns. Debt from loans are a different ball game. Okonjo Iweala got a debt forgiveness deal. I believe that's during the Obasanjo administration, and that didn't stop FDIs, foreign direct investments. So let's separate FDIs from loans. And then Samuel from Lekki says the president did well with the speech, but I'm not sure how he expects world leaders to forgive our debts. They know the cost of those flashy luxury vehicles we buy in large quantities for our convoys with borrowed funds, and how we inflate our construction cost so we can steal part of it. And they definitely read our newspapers and see how the AGF stole over 90 billion naira. They also know we give state pardon to corrupt officials. Will they forgive our debts while we continue borrowing? Miracle. That's a messaging from Sam. Sam is in Lekki. We have another message here. It says, weakest camp should continue the fight. He was unfairly treated, and the Northerners should not be taking the Southerners for a ride all the time. Atiku is advising that ASUU should only be removed in accordance with the PDP constitution. Why didn't he follow the PDP constitution on zoning? Godwin from Bagada thinks differently. He says, you're always misinterpreting the president's speech. There is nothing wrong for asking debt forgiveness. OBJ and GJ also canvassed for it. More messages pouring in. We'll take just one more from WhatsApp and then we get back into the stories. Ace from Ago says, ASUU agreed to resign if a northern candidate emerges from the presidential primaries. He has refused to resign. How do you expect anyone to believe he will resign if Atiku wins the election? More messages, but we'll get back to the stories. We'll come back to your messages in a moment. Glory, we come to you for these headline from the Daily Post. ASUU to appeal court ruling asking lecturers to end strike. Now, the Academic Staff Union of Universities says it will appeal the order given by the Industrial Court, asking its members to call off the 7-month-long strike. What's your reaction to that?
I feel like this further complicates the entire ASUU and APGIS issue. At first, I thought they were getting to a solution when they said they had, the only thing that was remaining was that ASUU would not get paid for the 6 months, and that was like the only lingering issue. But with the recent development, I am afraid that this might take us, many months in front, like our students would still remain on strike. And this is because ASUU understands that if they should abide with this court order, That means, the way our judicial system is, you're not sure as per when the whole issue would be resolved. So if they go back to the classroom, that means that they cannot strike again until when the whole issue is resolved. And, it puts ASUU in a tight corner. So I think ASUU would not, take this, obey this court order. And I also feel like, this is like using a backdoor kind of approach to technically defeat ASUU. And ASUU understands this because, of course, they also have their lawyers, they also have professors in their team. So another thing is I am not sure that the federal government has the capacity to also enforce this order. You know that the federal government has flouted several court orders, so, he doesn't have the, what should I say now? It doesn't have the justification to force ASUU in this case. You remember the case of El Zazaki, Dasuki, Sowore, like all those instances that I have cited. The federal government flouted court order. And you know that the court is not the enforcer, it is the executive. So how are they going to enforce this? And like, I was just thinking about it. I think, are they going to, for instance, sack all the lecturers if they refuse to obey the court order? Even I don't know if the number of police to a lecturer is not more, you get. So I don't know how the executive, wants to do all of this.
All right. Now let's go on to the Punch newspaper where, still sticking with the judiciary, court sets aside $47 million Paris Club payment judgment. Now, the Federal High Court in Abuja has set aside a consent judgment entered in favor of a company, Panic Alert Security Systems Limited, against the trustees of the Nigeria Governors Forum for the payment to some individuals and organizations for roles they played in the Paris Club refund received by the federal government. Did you see this story as well? I want your thoughts on this.
Okay, so the case has a twist, and that's the issue of jurisdiction. So, the Nigerian Governors Forum had asked that the company in question should help them interpret a 16-page document, and it was like what they had was a simple contract, and when they went to court, they also decided to settle out of court at some point. So, after they had decided to settle out of court, Malami had also said they were going to pay the company the money. But along the line, they kicked against it that, they were not going to pay the 47,000, dollars now. So, the issue now is the issue of
47 million, you mean?
Yes, 47 million. So the issue now is that of jurisdiction. The federal court does not take issues of simple contract, so it's now like a loss to the company in question.
All right, thank you very much. Ikemesit, let's come to you again for the story before we take some more messages as we brace ourselves for the 8 o'clock hour. Niger Delta, Pengasson fingers military, other top security officers in oil theft. That comes in from the Daily Post. As the president of the Petroleum and Natural Gas Workers Association of Nigeria, Comrade Festus Osifo, yesterday said heads of the Nigerian military police and other security agencies collude to steal crude oil in the Niger Delta. Isn't this a damning revelation?
Yeah, it is, and it's one that you're increasingly hearing from voices within the region, right? Nigeria is doing something like 1.3 million barrels or we've been producing something on the order of 1.3 million barrels of crude a day for the better part of 3 years now. Our OPEC quota is 1.8 million barrels of crude. Nigeria has proven reserves to support oil production of 2 million barrels of crude. So that's a huge drop-off of between 500 and 700,000 barrels of crude, depending on whatever source you look at. And basically, there's a Senate committee, an ad hoc committee, which is supposed to investigate oil lifting, theft, and its impact on petroleum production, which was the forum in which Pengasson, right, made this revelation. And look, here's the thing. oil theft is such that it is capital intensive. It is an industrial level activity, right, that requires the kind of logistical and financial support that really small scale oil thieves, right, really can play in these markets. And I know that a lot of Nigerians have this picture of, people breaking and tapping pipelines and, small illegal crude facilities, but that's really not the dominant picture on the ground, right? When you actually study these issues, as, my team at SBM is the fact of the matter is that it's an industrial level activity. It requires a lot of coalition. It requires a lot of support. It requires the kind of coordination that you can only get if elements of the official administrative apparatus are in on the game. And basically what Pengasan is saying is that you cannot lose 500 to 700,000 barrels of crude production a day from just small scale oil theft. And so it did mention large parts of the military services. We have had other Senate committees. We have had other investigative agencies. The House is also carrying out a similar investigation, right, in this regard, that I think in July or in August came out, and also they were more specific about the Navy, right, being involved. This investigation is still very much in its early stages. A report is supposed to be due in 2 weeks. From my perspective, when you pair this with the recent oil surveillance contract that the federal government offered to Tompolo, for example, in the Delta, and the kind of fracas that is already causing within the, if I can describe them as the Niger Delta militant community, right? When you also compare this with the fact that 3 weeks ago, there was actually a tanker that was full of Nigerian crude that the Nigerian Navy tried to arrest in the Gulf of Guinea, and it couldn't. And we had to rely on the government of, I think it was Sao Tome and Principe or Equatorial Guinea, I can't remember which of our maritime neighbors, to actually seize and arrest that tank. It just shows you the scale of the problem, right, how much resources that we are losing as a country, and really why this issue should be tackled with speedily and quickly.
Thank you very much for your thoughts. Let's take it back to WhatsApp, where no name to this message, and it goes, I'm not a member of the PDP or APC, but I support what the Wike camp did 100%. If there were agreements, those agreements should be honored. In this case, it is a matter of north-south balance in key positions in the party, and the Atiku side has breached it. ASUU is the major person to bring peace in the PDP if he agrees to step down, or all should calm down, win the election, then come back and agree on how power should be shared. Idima Puza from Surulere sends that message across to us. Ovis in Yaba is saying the issue with the PDP key representatives right now is this: if they cannot keep the award now or influence one another to keep the award and do as they promised, how do we expect them to do so if they are in power? Serious food for thought. Dami comes in again. The manner politicians manage their parties is the way they manage the country at large. They rather burn down their own homes than make concessions to advance their collective interest. The National Industrial Court has been used similarly against doctors by Lagos State. It never resolves the issues, as it just another way the government uses to delay and avoid honoring agreements. Government never goes to courts to interpret the agreements, but to break down the strikes. ASUU will challenge the judgment or call it off today and call a new one by Monday, and nothing changes. Daniel from Festag, they're already going to appeal the court. I'm not sure they're going to call it off. Ali from Apapa says, so because OBJ and GJ canvassed for debt forgiveness, every other president should be doing the same, so that they know us as the country that will borrow money and later beg to not pay back. I don't think that is the path we want to follow all the time. It doesn't speak well of us. Ali in Apapa sends his opinion across to us. Saken also sends a message. He says, Atiku allowed a seemingly small matter to fester by going into a fight with a man who has nothing to lose. That's Wike. Right now, it's up to ASUU to voluntarily resign if they are to get any resolution. The unifier is now on fire. Wow. Okay. Tony from M Beach says, they must have observed that the more our debts are forgiven, the more we develop the drive to take more. It was forgiven during OBJ, and here it is. Look at where it's landed us. Our leaders will be on their toes if their debts on their hands, and that's okay. Forgive our debts, and they are preparing to commit more. What kind of prayer is that? Why isn't the federal government working with NUC and ASUU to develop a framework for funding tertiary institutions? T in Yaba. He goes on, he says, Obasanjo asked for debt cancellation with a clear-cut plan. What plan did President Buhari share for the new debt cancellation, please? Okay, being realistic, the regional marginalization factor in the PDP is just too plenty. Presidential candidate and party chairman, I really don't see Wike's point of logic though, because even if he has been funding the party, he's basically using state government money. So why bother crying over spilled milk? Some people should start sounding like sour grapes, and he's basically attracting the attention of EFCC to himself. The messages are just too much, but we take just one and we wrap up. Oil theft is rampant and continuous because the security apparatus and top influential government officials are involved. Let's not deceive ourselves. Emo from Ikeja wraps up the conversation for us today. We're out of time and we need to go. We must thank you so much, Glory Etam, for being a part of the show today, as well as Ikemesit Effiong.
Thank you so much for having me.
Let's do this again tomorrow at 7:30 when it's time for Freshly Pressed on Smooth 98.1. My name is Victor Pepple. At 8:15 will be time for The Grapevine. Good morning.
Invest in your tomorrow.
Messages are just so much, but we have to go. Thank you so much, YouTube.
You picked good stories today.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks,
Enjoy
Victor.
the rest of your day.
Thanks, Glory.